All right, this is Michael Manjos, Chairman, Board of Finance. Good evening. It is May 7th, 6 o'clock. Board of Finance budget meeting. Please allow me to confirm the member staff anticipated participants are here. Members, please respond in the affirmative when I call your name. John Ostrowski.
Here.
Steve Kirsch.
Here.
Jane Krzyzewski.
Here.
Rebecca O'Donnell.
Here.
Greg Hirsch.
Here.
All right, we're all here. And we have First Selectman Ken Kellogg.
I am here.
Ron Bonowski, Director of Finance.
Here.
Heidi Mead.
Here.
All right. I hereby declare we have a quorum and call this meeting to order. Copy of the agenda and any related materials have been posted and can be found on the Town of Monroe's website, www.monroect.org, for public inspection. This public meeting is being conducted remotely in compliance with Section 1 of Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B, dated March 14th, 2020, using GoToMeeting electronic conference technology. Using this technology, the public shall participate in real time by a computer, tablet, smartphone, and telephone using the access information set forth on the meeting agenda. Please be advised that each meeting has unique participation information, so that make sure you have access to the correct meeting. Notice is hereby given that only 250 participants may access this remote electronic public meeting at one time. Access this meeting using this technology is granted solely by the technology provider on a first come, first access basis and is not controlled by the Town of Monroe. While as anticipated, we will not exceed this participation limit for this meeting. Should it appear we are approaching said limit so that any member of the public is denied access to this meeting, I, as chairman, reserve the right to adjourn and continue the meeting at a later date using technology appropriate to ensure all members of the public may participate. Please take notice of the following regarding this remote electronic meeting. This meeting is being conducted in real time. This meeting may be open to the public, that any member of the public may listen or view to this meeting anonymously. This meeting is being recorded, and then while we ask you to mute your microphones unless recognized to speak, anything you say, do, or is displayed on the screen may become part of the recording. The recording is posted to the town's website within 7 days. The recording should be made advisable to the public within a reasonable time. The meeting should follow standard parliamentary procedures. However, I ask all participants to follow these special rules. Please mute your microphones so as to reduce background noise at any time you're not speaking. Prior to the speaking on each occasion, each speaker will clearly state their name and title for the record. The use of the chat feature is prohibited and will not be considered during the meeting if in use. All right, I think we are good to go. First thing we have is review of the minutes and voting record of April 23rd. Somebody make a motion.
Steve Kirsch, Board of Finance. I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes and voting record for April 23rd, 2020.
We have a second.
I'll second. It's Rebecca O'Donnell.
Rebecca, terrific. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll go around for votes. Steve?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. We're 6-0. Perfect. All right. There's only a couple things I want to cover tonight. The first is I wanted to see if Ron has an update as far as estimated salary increases we had asked to look into on both the Board of Ed and town side.
I do. So which number do you want first, Mike? Board of Ed?
You pick whichever one you like.
Okay, Board of Ed increase 911,570.
Okay.
Town 309,345.
All right. That brings us about what, $1,220,000? Is that good?
Yeah. And Yeah, it's $1,020,915.
Very good. Quick math. All right. Perfect. And I know I know there's been conversations ongoing, so I think now that we have those numbers, we can start plugging those into the budget and seeing what we look like. I know we had estimated pulling out $1.5 million. Gets us a lot of the way there. Do we have any update on medical or any of those things, Ron, too?
So Mike, we do have we have an update, but the potential savings, there's a couple moving parts there. Number one, we're anticipating some more people rolling on, so we'd want to keep some contingency there.
Right, with what's going on in the world, we expect, I would think people might join, right?
Yeah, we've kind of been warned by our consultants that that's likely going to be the case.
Okay.
So that's a hard number to put our hands around. That's the problem.
That's a swag at best, right?
Hey,
Yeah.
Ron, this is Craig. The question is, are you anticipating more people to be joining because they may lose their jobs and their spouses might be joining? Is that why?
Correct.
Okay, just that's why I want to make sure we're on the same page.
All right. So without that, what are we looking at? Let's take it that way.
Mike, what was that a question directed to me? I'm sorry.
It was, I'm sorry. So if we don't factor that in, what were we looking at?
So the rates are scheduled to remain flat through October 1st, correct? And there's an anticipation that it's going to be a 6.5% increase after that.
And originally we had budgeted, what, a 10% increase?
Correct.
Can I just clarify one thing quickly, Ron? The increase that is expected will be a catch-up, though, to make sure that the entire year blended becomes 6.5. So the actual increase 3 months from now will be higher than 6.5, probably more like 8 or so. So if you look, it's
for the year to budget at 10% for 9 months.
Yes, but what I'm saying is when it goes up to 6.5, they're going to annualize that. So it will be 6.5 off the total year, not just for the remaining 9 months. That's all. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I guess my question is, did we budget 10% over this year, or did we budget 10% for 9 months?
We budgeted 10% over the year.
Got it. Perfect. Okay, good.
And now, Steve Kirsch, Board of Finance. So now we're going to be budgeting 6.5 over the full year.
Well, I would say plus I would assume some kind of contingency for the
No, I'm just talking about the rate.
for the rate, yes. So I mean,
Okay.
maybe you end up budgeting an 8% just to build in, you know, a potential addition.
Yeah, Mike, I wanted to just bring this up. I don't think those numbers are, and Ken, chime in if you disagree. I think those are estimates at this point. I don't know if they're necessarily final numbers.
Got it.
The last thing I'd seen from Mike, I thought was pretty, seemed like it was a commitment, but let me see if I can find out while we're still talking.
I believe you're right, Ron. I think the final numbers were supposed to be coming in June for when the rate changes.
They just want to wait till just after we finish the budget, right? That's the plan.
Let's see here.
Does feel like that some years, yes. Okay. All right. So in summary, we don't know if they're exact, but we certainly might have a little bit of pickup there. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, that's correct. It's not going to be a huge pickup, and that pickup could get lost quickly.
So can we bring it?
A wild ass guess. I mean, are we looking at 50 grand? Are we looking at 25 grand? Are we looking at 100 grand? You hear me, Ron?
I think he's,
Yeah, he might be
He's trying to
consulting.
do some calculation or something there.
I think,
All right, well, we'll leave him to come back. He's got his pencil and paper going. I didn't scroll over far enough to see him. He's not paying attention to me.
Is abacus.
So
Exactly.
Mike, this is Steve,
Yeah.
Steve Kirsch, Board of Finance. So if we had budgeted originally for 10, and we're talking about 6.5 for the year, if we bring it down to 8%, does that
Right.
give us enough contingency? Is everybody happy with that?
We don't know.
Well, we got to pick a number.
Yeah, but that's
We're
why
gonna
we're
have to pick a
Ron.
number, but I guess
Yeah.
I would,
So
and the what the dollars are. Go ahead, Ron.
yeah, I'm gonna pull up. I actually did a worksheet with the different scenarios at the different percentages for the board side. Heidi's working on the town side right now. Hang on one sec. So what's that? The pickup in total? So it's about an $80,000 for the town side. 80,000.
What does the 80,000 represent? So
If you split the differential between 10 and 6.5.
Got it.
okay, so it's not really a big number.
No.
That's
You
just the
get a
town.
couple people who, you get a couple additions to the policy, and it, to the plan, it wipes it right out.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, for some reason I was thinking it was going to be a bigger number than that. So
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was hoping for 50K, but it could be a risk as well. Okay.
That's the town number at 80K? What about the Board of Ed? Or is that the total?
Give me a sec, Steve.
Okay.
Putting him on the spot.
No, actually, I'm just trying to understand, so take whatever time you need.
that's a good question, Steve.
So you're looking at between what was budgeted at 10 versus the 6.5. It's about a $220,000 differential. So my thought, and I had prepared a spreadsheet for the Board of Ed probably about a month back when the initial rates came out. So my thought was to kind of split that difference, and if we went to 8%, which would give a contingency of about 115,000.
Okay. So we would pick up 85 grand then.
Oh, 105.
105?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he just said 220 minus 150.
Now, again, I was making, back when I was making those assumptions, that was I think I prepared this right around the time when COVID was all starting. So that wasn't really factored in. I think the contingency, like I said, that could get blown out of the water real quick.
Okay. All right. If we could get maybe a firmer number for next week, then we could run everything through the model. I don't think we need to do it now, but maybe for next week we could have that breakdown and we could finalize a decision on that. If that works for everybody.
Yeah, Steve Kirsch, can we get that ahead of the meeting?
Yeah, I'm sure I can put it in the packet.
Thank you.
Okay. Heidi, you want to bring up the capital too? Because I know we want to take a peek at capital. We basically talked about not doing any new bonding, but I also want to discuss some of the smaller capital projects. Think if we can live without them, I'd be happy to, obviously, based on our discussions. I know we are still talking about the Board of Ed because I think my feeling is I do want to stay on top of that with the Chromebooks, but let's see if there's anything else that's going to be an issue.
Mike, do you want the entire plan up or just the budget?
Just the budget's fine. Okay. So I think we discussed everything that's in bonding, right? And we talked about the Board of Ed. Was there anything besides tech on there that we had to address?
No, Mike, I think the two big pieces were the Chromebooks and the labs at Massac. Those are the two big pieces. I know, as we've discussed, I have no idea what kind of Chromebooks I'm getting back. When I get them back, we lent out 735 of them. And then the labs, part of the concern with the labs is that we get money in Perkins grant to run certain classes and to run dual enrollment programs with Naugatuck Valley. And that month, if you have to run those classes to be eligible for, it's about $25,000 in Perkins funding. So those labs are pretty, well, if we don't have those labs, we can't run those classes, and we risk losing that grant money too. But yeah, in the Chromebooks, as we've talked about before, gave out 735. I don't know what we get back. And we had 311 going end of life prior to that.
Hey, Mike, this is Craig. So I see on our agenda, was dated May 5th or 2020 for technology, and it says Chromebook replacements on the list, $37,000. And I know the number we were looking at was much larger than that. So I'm trying to reconcile.
That's what I thought, and that's where my confusion was, because I thought last meeting we were at 75 and 30 for the labs, and at 105 was my notes. So maybe I got something wrong, but maybe you guys can walk us through that one more time, because I had different numbers too, Craig. I was the same way.
Yeah, I'm going to have Paul Courses on. I'm going to have him jump in, because I think we were working off two different capital plans. And I know the plan is the labs and then whatever we can do for the Chromebooks. But Paul, if you want to jump in and explain this a little bit.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So yeah, if look on the screen there, so initially there was the ask of the Chromebooks and then one lab. And then, and Joe, help me remember here. I don't remember what month it was, but I guess when the BOE was doing their budget, Donna Lane had asked for a 5-year capital improvement plan. And that's where the $195,000 came from, which is what's up on the screen now.
Can we just scroll that screen down a little so we can see all the technology?
So just to get back to what we were talking about last week, this is correct. Because before you were saying it was like 300, I forget, it was like, I don't know if it was like 311, the number of Chromebooks that needed to be replaced at roughly at $245 a pop,
Right.
which brings us to $76,000. So why is it only saying 37,000 now?
Right. That was my thing too. Craig, you're right on the, we're on the same place. Yep. Awesome.
Correct. This is Paul Course. So initially, when this plan was put together, this was part of just a rolling plan. And for this 1 year, we were going to just keep the expired Chromebooks in the K2 and buy $37,000 worth of Chromebooks for replacements and to bolster our testing fleet. This was pre-COVID-19. And then we lent out over 700 Chromebooks.
Okay, so right now you're planning on, I think it was, you had ones that expired 2018, one that expired in 2019. So you're only doing that 1 year and you're not replacing the other ones now.
And correct. This is Paul. And what we would do is use some of those newer Chromebooks to replace the worst of the worst, and then also add to the fleet of available testing Chromebooks that would be available for the testing grades. Now, that being said, also there are 3 labs at Massac that require replacements. I don't know which lab or labs are tied to the Perkins grant, and I will need to find that out. My idea is that the initial ask to the Board of Education was $195,000. That being said, whatever we will get, as per my statement that I issued on Tuesday, we would take whatever CapEx we could get and use that first to replace only the computers required for to be eligible for the Perkins grant. So, for example, if it was 1 lab and there were only 22 kids in that lab enrolled for that lab class, that would be all we would replace so that we could remain eligible. The rest of the money would go to Chromebook replacements, because at this point, I have no idea what we are going to get back at the end of the school year. We had no idea that we were going to be lending out over 700 Chromebooks and chargers to the students.
You trying to say kids are going to lose charges?
Well, certainly and this is Paul, if we get the Chromebooks back and we don't get the chargers back, it's not going to be very useful to us. And I have no idea what condition these Chromebooks will come back to us in. Hopefully, I certainly hope that we get all of them back and they're all in decent shape, but I don't know. I have no way of knowing that. I know that we've already had a couple of families already swap out Chromebooks for replacements at the schools.
All right, this is Rebecca. I have a question. When it comes to the school testing, those are done not on the bring your own technology. Those are done on the school issued Chromebooks, correct?
Yeah, Rebecca, and Paul, you can jump back in on this too, but yeah, they have to, there's certain platforms that they have to have on them. So we can't house that obviously on student devices. So that's grades 3 through 8. They have to,
Okay.
Yeah, Rebecca, this is Paul. Yes, so for the standardized testing, there is a special SBAC client, they call it, that needs to be pushed to the district-owned devices that will allow them to take the test securely. So
Okay.
it has to be a district-owned device.
Okay. So with the change of this $50,000 to now only be funding 37 for the Chromebook replacements, are we solid that you have enough for the testing requirement?
No. Not after lending out over 700 Chromebooks.
So I guess
Okay.
where we're trying to get to, Paul, is like, forget what was in the budget before. What's the minimum you're going to need to cover the Chromebooks and the lab you need?
Yeah. So do you want the 75,000 or do you want the 37,000?
I would definitely take the 75,000 at this point.
Can I just jump in? Why the change? Because we were talking about replacing the 2 years, and that was last week, and the fact that I remember you told me if it's more than a year, you can't do the testing. So, is it just priorities? I'm trying to figure out what the change is from last week to this week.
Yeah, this is Paul. The priority hasn't really changed per se. At this point, ideally, having those older Chromebooks, the 311 Chromebooks, while they are in grades K through 2, we cannot use them for testing, which is fine. That's why they're in grades K through 2. They do present a security risk because they cannot be updated, they cannot be patched, but they still work. But with loaning out over 700 Chromebooks, ideally, what I'd like to be able to do is replace the 311 and then have additional funding to backfill what is certainly going to be a need to replace broken Chromebooks, damaged Chromebooks, things of that nature. And at the same time, be able to at least upgrade a lab at Massac. By rights, we really should be doing, well, I'd like to be able to do all 3 labs, but I understand that's not feasible.
This is Greg first, and I just want to, just one other thing is just to kind of mention in there is when lending out I'm not sure what the reasoning was to lend out the better Chromebooks. I think you would lead off with the ones that were older in life. Would have been probably I think a wiser decision, unless for some reason for testing purposes you needed to do the newer ones. So I'm just going to throw that out there. And then,
Craig, if I can answer that,
yes.
The reason why the newer Chromebooks were used was because a lot of the video conferencing software that we use for the students requires the newer OS. Okay. So the older Chromebooks would not have been conducive to distance learning.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Paul, for that answer.
Yep.
Paul, this is Steve Kirsch. If we put the 75,000 back in for the Chromebooks, and you want the other stuff, what about the other? There's 1, 2, 3, 4 other rows. If money was really an issue, could we slide those by a year, or would that not be a trade for Chromebooks that you would want to make?
Yeah, Steve, this is Paul. So as per the statement that I had issued on Tuesday that was part of the board packet, all of the other projects would be deferred. In other words, projector replacements would be deferred, network switch upgrades would be deferred, display upgrades, and that was a project where we were looking to replace in classrooms where it was suitable. Instead of using the old style projector and smart board, we would go with a smart display, primarily at the high school, as a pilot to start. That would be deferred. as well as the elementary teacher laptop replacements that are now 5-6 years old. Again, we would get another year out of them.
Okay, so it sounds to me, and I read your letter, but your letter also only had the $37,000 in for the Chromebooks, and your arguments here and with Craig's questions, I'm tending to favor the $75,000 to get the 311 units replaced, and then if you still need more, doing some of these deferrals, and so basically I'm looking at, you're at 195 for the total request. We add in the difference between 37 and 75, and if you still need more, then you'd have to defer those other items. That's sort of where I'm headed.
Steve, this is Paul. Yeah, I was going, when I issued that statement, I was under the impression that the $195,000 for capital was definitely going to be cut.
Right.
So
And that was, that's
Yeah.
fine, because that was another question that I had as either Craig or Rebecca was talking, is whether or not your letter of May 5 was in response to, and I'll use the word pressure, or expectation that something, wouldn't be fully funded, as opposed to something you would do if you were designing the best solution for the.
I mean, I thought we had discussed 105 last week, which was kind of where my head was at. And then that's why I was surprised when I saw the 195 number come back up.
Mike, this is Paul. I believe that initial $105,000 may have been from Jack Zamri initially, way
No,
back.
I thought it was last week in the meeting. I'm talking about last week's meeting.
Okay, yeah, I don't recall the 105 number.
Yeah, we were looking,
75 and
I
then
don't know if we were looking at an earlier capital plan, but I was concerned about the Chromebooks that were going out, and that
right. No, I was looking at 75 for Chromebooks and
30 for the lab, right?
Right.
Right, but the problem with
exactly.
that is we were not looking at all of the other items that had always been in their capital plan. Those first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows here, right? Those
Right,
6
but I think
rows,
you said that's all something that's deferrable.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, the nice thing about capital
yeah,
is
okay, I got it, Mike. Yeah,
the whole purpose of the capital we're discussing was that we can always pick up capital in 6 months. There's nothing that says just because we don't say yes to capital now that if in August we see that things are going better than we expected, we can always, request more capital. That's not, it just has to be, promoted by Ken and approved by us and town council, and boom, we can push it through. So capital is something we can pick back up later. So what I want to do is make sure we get him the absolute minimum he needs to survive and get that funded. And then we can always come back for a second bite at the apple.
okay, but the 105 was made up of what? 75,000 for the 2 sets of
Chromebooks and one lab.
and 1 lab. Okay,
Right.
where the 111 on the chart we're looking at, or we were
It was
looking
3
at,
labs.
that's all 3 labs.
Right.
Correct.
And right now, we would try to get the labs in to get the dual enrollment, and then whatever we can get for the, however Chromebooks we can get. And to your point, Mike, whatever we can get through to get, whatever we can get to get by. I mean, if this gets to a point where we don't have enough Chromebooks, not where we want to be, but if we have to shift Chromebooks from school to school, we did that years ago. It gets really tough for testing, but to your point, if we can.
So I think what I'm hearing, this is Steve Kirsch, Board of Finance, what I'm hearing is I think we're talking about putting the $75,000 back in for Chromebooks and reducing the lab number to 1 lab. And if that comes out to 105 or whatever that comes out to, that's what that's the plan we're going to go with as of right now.
That would be my plan. If you guys are in agreement, I would agree with that.
This
This
is
is
Steve
Paul,
Kirsch,
of
that's
course.
what I would do. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, at this point, that would be suitable.
Perfect. All right.
Good.
Heidi, what else is in the capital that we should talk about or touch on? I'm going to have to jump in a couple minutes. I'm going to have John take over, but I just want to make sure that there's no other surprises that, you know, are not emergencies. But I mean, like I said, and, you know, Ken's taking the lead on this. You know, he can make a capital request anytime he likes. And, you know, if he sees something that needs to be done, he can come to us in July and August, September, whatever month it is, and say, hey, this is a need, and we can allocate fund balance, we can allocate reserves, we can do a lot of different things. So my feeling is unless it is completely on fire, we push it off until, you know, we have a better feeling after we get through July. You know, because I think once we get through July and August and we have a good idea of that first tax payment, we're going to have a much better feel of where we're going. I mean, if it comes in as a disaster and we know that, then we know that's where we're at. And if it comes in great, then we know we can pick up all this stuff again.
Yeah, Mike, if I could jump in real quick.
Please. Thanks, Ken.
Ken Kellogg for Selectman, I don't disagree with you. I think, as you said, we can always address things that come. There is one thing that I think is a safety matter that is primarily funded from a grant, but does require some capital appropriation. That's the air packs for the Stevenson Fire Department. It's
I would agree.
So that I would think we'd want to leave in, so we don't want to lose the grant. But two, that is a safety issue. I don't want to delay.
I was going to say you don't want to put people at risk. Absolutely.
I would not delay that. I mean, everything else, to your point, could certainly be addressed later, unless there's something that we have to jump on July 1st, and I'm not aware that any of these are a jump on July 1st. I would ask maybe Paul to talk about the virtual server hardware. I know that is actually a cost savings program, but again, I'll defer to Paul as to whether or not that would be a must start July 1st, or if we could wait until we have a clearer picture on tax collection.
Hi, this is Paul. So regarding
We're getting used to you.
Just doing it for the record. So for the virtual server hardware, we're kind of at a crossroads right now. We have plans in place in the department to begin reducing the number of physical servers we have across the enterprise. And I know on the Board of Ed side, we've consolidated quite a few servers. And what I mean by consolidation is that we've looked at long and hard what servers we have and what servers we could potentially get rid of or reduce or consolidate into other functions. And the reason being is because the more servers you have, the more security risks they present, the more power and cooling they require. So we've been leveraging virtual technology so that we can have one physical box that would then house multiple virtual servers on a single box. At this point on the town side, we have 7 or 8 now servers that we've identified that are really almost 10 years old. They are well beyond their useful lifespan, and what we would like to do is consolidate those into virtual servers and upgrade their operating system. We do have some servers that are still running Windows Server 2008, which is end of life. They will still, like Chromebooks, they will still continue to work. However, they are no longer eligible for security patches and updates, meaning that they are now presenting a security, they could present a possible security problem on our network. And we have been upgrading, as we've been consolidating servers, we've been upgrading them to server 2016. So that being said, that virtual server hardware would be needed to continue what we've been doing across the enterprise, and this would be addressing the town hardware.
Paul, this is Steve Kirsch. How many new physical servers do you need to purchase in order to do all your virtual consolidation?
What we would do for this year is we would buy one. That would be that's 12,000, and we would probably look to consolidate about 4 to 5 different servers onto that single server.
And then you do the same thing next year and whatever.
Correct. What we would also do is leverage any retired equipment that we have. And we've done this on the board side. It's actually worked out fairly well. If we have an older piece of hardware, but not the oldest, it's what I would call middle age, which for Monroe could mean anything. But what we would do is we would take a server that's middle age, and then what we could do is take the appropriate hard disks, memory, things like that. If the processors are compatible, and bolster up that middle one, that middle server, and also create another virtual server as a stopgap until we get additional hardware after the initial purchase of the first one. So, the idea would be, we need to make some room, and this would allow us to do that.
Okay, Paul.
Excuse me, Paul, this is John. So Ken mentioned this could be a cost savings as well. So could you talk to that side of it?
Sure. The cost savings would be in the reduction of electricity. For now we're taking potentially 4 or 5 servers that we're powering and cooling and consolidating them into one server. So there's that. There's also the savings in terms of manpower. Instead of updating 5 servers, now we're updating one virtual server. There may be multiple instances, but it's just much more efficient to have one box to go to have to update on seemingly now a monthly basis between the security patches and things of that nature.
And Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, it's also maybe more of a cost avoidance. So instead of buying 4 new hardware servers, you're consolidating in terms of a long-term plan. That's probably better articulated as a cost avoidance.
Okay, I was just wondering if there was did you figure out like an ROI on that at all?
It's tough to quantify in terms of, the ROI would be, like Ken said, instead of buying a new server every year for each instance that we have, now we're just buying one server and putting 4 or 5 virtual instances on a single box.
I'll tell you one thing, if you're not able to do security patches, you're more exposed there than anything else. Anybody gets into your network, into your servers, because you're not current on patches, you talk about cost avoidance, you could really be in big trouble. So,
well, Steve, that's absolutely true. And I guess to speak to the ROI would be, if we get hit with ransomware, and our critical data is now encrypted, and we are now being held for ransom for Bitcoin, and that's usually in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for the ransom. We could avoid that.
Yeah. The only thing is that they're doing that at companies with latest technology as well. So, question, Paul, you said something about we're at a crossroads. What do you mean by that?
So, speaking about the ransomware and all of the cyber threats, one of the things that we have been very diligent about doing is educating the staff, both Board of Ed and town, on best practices for cybersecurity, cyber hygiene. We have had numerous phishing attempts on our network. with various phishing emails that have gone out that have been thankfully thwarted, or if somebody clicked on a link, we've been able to quickly identify any breaches that we've had in terms of, like, for example, we had an issue where somebody had clicked a phishing email, provided their username and password, which then had their email address be taken over, and then that email address was then propagating or trying to spread out that phishing attempt, right? And Craig, you know what I'm talking about. So we were able to, within minutes, quickly identify that this account had been breached. We immediately disabled the account. We immediately cleared out any pending emails that were going out, which is important because when emails go out from our organization and they are spam in nature, what ends up happening is that gets reported to the to technologies that put us on a blacklist. And once we get blacklisted, our email effectively gets shut down. We get put on a blacklist, and then simple emails that go outside the organization are now flagged as, hey, this organization is now on a blacklist, so they block the emails. But we've been able to quickly address those issues, mitigate any of those problems, and a lot of that has to do with numerous things. Number one, we've made humongous security changes on our back end, which I won't get into here, but if anybody is interested, please email me and I can give you the absolute specifics on some of the things that we've done. Training has been paramount to the end users. We've also done things like added a banner to any emails that are coming from outside the organization. They are now flagged with a warning. Not that everybody reads them, because of our last phishing attempt, it was very clear this didn't come from IT, and the user said, "Oh, well, I thought it was you guys." You know, so even though the banner is there, but again, just continual education. And then the other piece of that is upgrading the hardware, and both the hardware and the operating systems. You know, it's no secret that a lot of these ransomware and viral attacks are taking advantage of known vulnerabilities that, as long as the computers are patched in a timely manner, it should not be a vulnerability for the town. And that is something that we've strived. We have put every effort into making sure every single computer across the entire enterprise, Board of Ed, town, all the municipal departments and locations are 100% patched. We have a centralized antivirus solution. If somebody clicks on something that they shouldn't and potentially could infect something, we get an alert immediately. So we have been overly diligent on making sure that we don't fall victim of a cyber event.
So Paul, just another quick question. How many, you said, servers do you have that you will not take a security patch going forward?
At this point, there's, I believe the total is 8 that are running on older operating systems that are no longer patchable. They're running on Windows Server 2003, which went end of life, and there are no more security patches that are being issued for that operating system. Now, that being said, again, those servers will continue to function and work. However, Microsoft has taken the stance that if another security vulnerability is identified with that operating system, they will not patch it.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, John,
So,
is that
Paul,
something
it's
that
John
we
again,
would-
just to clarify. I'm sorry, Craig, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
I was just going to say to Paul, so the 12,000 covers how many of those 8 servers that are too old?
Between 4 and 5, what we're going to try and do is maximize the number of servers that we can on that single box. We leverage what's called the platform is called VMware, and what we'll be able to do is we will take a couple of the heavy hitters that we have and maybe some of the less intense servers that we have that we need. Like for example, an Active Directory controller. An Active Directory controller is something that when you log on to a computer on the network, it helps authenticate you. It says, yep, I'm John, and this is your password. Not a real heavy hitter. We need more than one, because if one goes down, then we're completely down. But what we would do is maybe look to consolidate a couple of bigger servers, like for example, a file server and a print server, and then also an Active Directory server. You know, and a couple of others, obviously. And ideally, you wouldn't want your 2 Active Directory servers on the same box. I get it. Not best practice, because if that box goes down, then you're kind of in the same boat. But the idea would be it would be temporary. We can, what I like to call Frankenstein another server as a temporary holdover, and then be able to move some of those other roles to that temporary server for now. You know, we can live with it for a year or 2, and then replace that second server and move the rest of the infrastructure over.
Hey, Paul,
That's
Steve
helpful.
Kirsch
Thank you.
again. What kind of a project time is that, you know, from when you acquire the hardware to the merging of 4 or 5 physicals onto a virtual?
Generally, it takes maybe a week or 2. You know, we build a template for the server, and then a lot of it has to do too with when we consolidate and move, we usually have to do it at a time where, you know, the server's not in use.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I would support, this is Steve Kirsch again. I would support this.
Hey, John, this is Craig. So is this something, I support it as well, but is this something that we put in now, or is it something that we're waiting to see how things go?
This is John. My guess would be we should just add that win with the air packs. It's not a big number at this point, and the Chromebooks, and that would be what we go with for the budget. And then, as Mike pointed out before, we can always add things later on as things come up if we need to.
Yeah, and then something I think we should consider, I mean, and we can revisit this later. I mean, if we're saying there's 8 servers that are going down, and with one we're only replacing 4, you know, do we look at a second one? You know, just something to consider down the road.
And this is Steve.
Sure.
Craig. Yeah, this is sort of why I was
Absolutely.
asking about how much time and effort it was, because if we do one in July and we find you know, financially we can do another one in August, and it's sort of a drop in for them, yeah, you do it in August. It's not, you know, it's something we can probably give them any time, and they can get it done in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, this is John, but it sounds like they may want that money for more Chromebooks if they need it, as opposed to doing
That's
another virtual server. But we'll let the IT guys give us their priority list. That I mean, I'd rely on that for that.
Agreed. And just saying, open to listen.
Sure, absolutely, Craig, you're right. We have to do that. Any other questions on capital?
John, just one other thing I'll just throw out there, and again, I don't know that this needs to be a ready out of the gate July 1st, but the other thing that could possibly be a infrastructure safety thing is the generator at Stevenson that's on there, but I'd rather get some more information on that first, which I'm waiting on still, just to see what the real criticality is of, you know, because as Mike said, we can always add mid-cycle if we need to. A larger number. So
Ken, what exactly? is that replacement of something, or is that something they don't have today? What's the history there?
I believe it is a replacement, but I need to get some more information from Public Works on that. They're telling me that some of the equipment there that's on generator is it can't fully. I believe it can't fully handle the load that's there right now. So that could involve, there's a fuel pump there and things like that we need to look at.
Yeah, it's a much bigger number, so.
Yeah. So let me. I couldn't get. I'll have to get back to you on that one. But I think, as we
That
said
sounds
earlier,
good.
everything else. I mean, certainly things can be presented mid-cycle for a special appropriation once we know where we're at from a revenue perspective.
Yeah, this is John. Thanks, Ken. That makes sense.
Yep.
Hey, John.
I don't think we had anything
Rebecca
else.
O'Donnell.
Go
I
ahead,
just
Rebecca.
had a quick question on the items at the top of the page, like the paving at Massac. Is everyone okay with those? Do those stay, or do we need to adjust for those numbers too?
Well, last time we talked about what we could do with town aid, road, and grants. So that I think is going to continue to proceed. It's
John, this is Ron.
Go ahead,
If I
Ron.
could speak to the paving at Massac. That's actually going to be handled through money in a fund with the Board of Ed, where they collect the parking fees from the students. And that's to repave the main driveway, which if anyone's been on the main driveway at Massac lately, they'll realize it needs repaving. But that's where those funds are coming from.
Okay, so that stays then, right? So that's completely separate from the paving that we already talked about.
Yes, it's not part of the town paving.
Right. Okay. All right.
Yeah, Ken Kelly, I'll just jump in. I think anything that is got a grant funding source exclusively, not tied to bonding, I think, it would behoove us to just leave it in there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Or perhaps, private things like the police cars that are in there under private duty and OPEX. I mean, that I think we're all on the same page there. That I think that should, those kind of things should stay in because they're not hitting OPEX on a private duty.
This is Steve. I've got on the same subject. Ron, we're not doing any other line striping of the parking lots or any of that, anything else like that at Massac? This is just the driveway?
Steve, this is Ron. Not that I'm aware of. I would let, I don't know if Joe is aware of anything. I believe it's just
Okay.
Yeah, we usually
paving
stripe.
the main driveway.
We usually stripe, every year or every other year. That would not be part of this. This would just be to pave the north driveway entrance where the guard check is from the road up to the guard check.
Thank you.
This is John. Any other comments or questions on capital? Hearing none, it sounds like we're good so far, because I know town council is going to take this up on Monday. Mike and I are going to join in on their call and take them through our opinion of what we think we should be doing at this point with capital.
Yep, John, thank you. I appreciate your going to that so we can make sure council's all looped in on this. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. That we all need to be on the same page for this at this point. I didn't have anything else on our list for tonight. I don't know if anyone else has any topics they'd like to talk about or get more information before our meeting next week.
So this is Steve Kirsch, Board of Finance. So John, I think the original calendar said we were going to have a public hearing next week and vote on the budget. Are we still on that cycle? I mean, I think it's my understanding that we have till the 21st to actually make our final decision. Are we going to be in a position to do that next week?
Good question, Steve. This is John. I think that the goal is we can play around with the model and see how people are comfortable with it. We may have all the information to be able to vote, but we do have time. If that doesn't happen, that may be a very long meeting to get that done. I'm not sure. But the goal is if we can do it, yes, then we'll take care of it next week. But if there are outstanding questions or issues, then obviously no.
Ken, did
Anything
you
else, or
want to
should
jump
we-
in? John, this is Ron. I believe the date you guys have the budget till is the 20th. I don't know if
Yes.
that.
Yeah, Ken Kellogg, I believe you're correct, Ron. I believe the deadline is the 20th to propose the Board of Finance's budget, which, as you know, then will go on to the next step before you actually have to adopt it in the first week of June. I did want to just jump in real quick. I did speak to Mike earlier today, John, and I think the plan was we spoke and he agreed, and we wanted to notice the public hearing to start first and then your special meeting to follow the public hearing, just to have it run a little bit smoother than the first public, instead of having the meeting within the meeting kind of thing. So we'll circle back with him, and just assuming he still wants to call the meeting in that fashion, that's the way we'll do it. But I just want to make sure people here were aware of that possibility.
That Steve Kirsch, that makes
makes
sense to me.
Yeah.
And John, I had one other thing on my list.
Sure.
We need to talk about, if not tonight, then certainly before next week. We had plugged in $1.5 million of cuts, I think, of spending reduction someplace. What's happening with that? Where are we? What are we talking about? Because I don't think we've really spent any time trying to figure that one out.
Steve, this is John. So part of that was looking at the salary concessions that we talked about at the beginning of the meeting. So you've got, we came up with 1.2 of the 1.5. As long as those numbers are solid, then we just need to find the difference.
So those salary numbers, have we got concessions from everybody?
I'm not sure that that's a firm number. I mean, a firm concession, but Ron, you give us a little more information about where we are with that?
So I can't really speak to where we are with the negotiations, nor would I think that would be proper to do that right now. I think the idea is those negotiations may go on well beyond the Board of Finance having the budget. I mean, that could take a while. I think what you guys will be doing is making your adjustments, and then we'll have to manage them after the fact. If that makes sense.
It does,
So
Ron. I think you characterized it pretty well. I mean, I think I said at the last meeting, it wasn't a hard no, and I am still optimistic that folks will come to the table, but I think right now it's kind of a wait and see where we are.
So Joe, I have a question. So what kind of a deadline do we have for that then, if this can continue to go on and roll out? And when will we know when we have to make hard decisions like what Trumbull's doing?
It's a good question, John. I don't have the answer. I think my feeling is that on the Board of Ed side anyway, folks might want to see, what it's going to look like, what the cut might look like, and then come to the table to see where we are.
And I was gonna say, John, it looks like they're waiting for us to make the number.
Craig, so that sounds good. So then my guess would be we should show them how many other cuts we need to make instead, and let them decide based on the level of where that ends up, whether they want to play along or not. I mean, I don't like that game myself, but if they need to sit back and wait for us to move first, I guess we'll make some hard calls.
And I think they were just, I think, and I don't want to mischaracterize anything that they've said, but I think they were just wondering what what was the reasoning behind any hard number,
So Steve Kirsch, again, Joe, do we have to let the teachers who might be let go if that was, where the cuts had to come from? Is there something in the contract or otherwise where they have to be notified by a certain date?
If we were doing a normal reduction in force, but if it's budgetary, it can come after that. It's May 1st is a state deadline, but if there's budgetary implications, that date doesn't hold.
Okay.
This is Ron Bonofsky, Director of Finance. I just want to remind everyone, you were dealing with quite a few bargaining units over, both the town side and the Board of Ed side. So this is, it's not just one bargaining unit.
Right.
So it is going to be bit involved.
Understood.
Yeah, Ron, John, it's John. I get it. I'm just, that's not how I would play this game if we had to. And it's unfortunate, but if we have to put some hard numbers out there of changes that we're going to recommend in order to get them to come to the table, then I'm okay doing that. I don't want to do that, but I'm okay doing it.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Kirsch again. I mean, the value is $1.5 million, and if that's what we've got to do to bring the budget in line, I mean, after next week we'll at least know what that number is. Maybe we get it, pared down or whatever. Then they can do their own math because they know what their salaries and stuff are, and they know what that would be in terms of staffing. I wish we didn't have to go there. I just don't really want to go there, but.
Agreed.
Steve, I agree with you.
I'm going to say, Steve, you made a good point. We've already kind of thrown a number out there on what we're looking at, so it's not like it's a secret. So,
I mean, the fact of the matter is, you look at where the budgets for the Board of Ed and the town were in terms of increases, and in terms of what percentage of the overall town budget those two parts make up. The bulk, if you're going to save that kind of money, the bulk is coming from the education system, which is absolutely not what I want to do. I've gone on record, early on, saying the existing cuts. I'm still concerned with, the existing cuts and things like maintenance. And I do have one final question for Joe. So yeah, the number's out there, and I think everybody ought to deal with it as if it's reality, because I think it is. My last question that I think I had for the night was to Joe, and that is any talk about what it might cost, what new procedures might be put in place to restart school in the fall that we're looking at. I know I mentioned at the last meeting, there was a cut to maintenance, and I'm thinking we're going to need to be doing more maintenance and more cleaning and that kind of stuff. So do you all have has there been any discussions between, either in district or with other superintendents and, what you all are looking at?
It's a great question, Steve. And I got to be honest with you. I was on with the Western Connecticut superintendent today. This was a big part of the conversation. And the scary thing is, we're creating a budget for a program that existed last year and which could be very, very different next year. There are regional task force that are advising the commissioner and advising this, this whole reopening Connecticut, commission that is going to give guidance out to schools as we move, as we begin to move forward. But, it is anyone's guess right now. And that's, I think we were all, pretty, every superintendent's in the same position right now. They have no idea, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do social distancing with kids? Are we going to be, bringing kids on to school buses? Are we going to be loading half the school buses? Then how do we do that with our transportation expenses? Are we testing kids as soon as they walk into the building? Or are we testing kids as soon as they get onto the school buses? Are we sanitizing the buses after every run? I mean, are we providing PPE equipment for teachers and for students? There's a million questions right now that the task force is looking at, and the first thing that they're looking at is the first thing they're looking at is health and safety. But it runs completely in conflict to what's happening. And, I know what's happening in Monroe is not endemic to Monroe. As you just open the newspaper, in the last couple of days, and we just see in our neighboring towns with, having similar struggles. So we're gonna have really conflicting demands moving forward. And I don't know. The answer right now, Steve, is nobody knows. The conversations are happening, but it's more questions than answers right now. As we get more information, we're gonna have it, but we're gonna also have, be moving in. I don't know how much, and the state's probably not in great shape to be helping out either. So it's definitely something that everyone's gonna be dealing with. The only thing I want to go back to the concessions. I just want to make sure that we're being clear. We're talking about the total Board of Ed side. I want to make sure we're not. The teachers were forthcoming this week and did come to speak to us, and they are still open, and that's encouraging. But I think sometimes that particular group may feel they're targeted. And I know they're the biggest group. They make up the biggest increase. But I just wanted to say that because it is it's everybody. There's a whole bunch on that side, on our side.
Yep. No, I appreciate that, Joe. Steve, that was a good question. And yeah, Joe, I'm concerned with the number too, because it may mean we have to cut other things in order to support these other changes that are going to be coming down the pike. So that's another big unknown one way or another. And unfortunately, it may end up hurting some other programs.
I know. And no one wants to
keep. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said no one wants to be there, John. You're absolutely right.
No, it's the worst of all. But yeah, Steve, you're right to bring that up. That's a very important issue that we're going to not lose sight of. On that happy note, anything else before we adjourn? If none, anyone wants to make a motion?
Steve Kirsch, motion to adjourn.
We got a second and we're out of here.
I'll second. It's Rebecca O'Donnell.
Thanks very much, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, everybody. For your time.
More time here tonight. Thanks, guys. Stay safe.
No. Get ready for a long meeting next week, but we're good for tonight.
Yeah.
Stay safe, everybody.